Welcome to Borderline Genius, our second episode. I'm Anthony Pagnato, Vice President of Sales and Marketing for Mohawk Global, and with me is Kenton Grimes, our trade guru and licensed customs broker. We're on our second episode, Kenton. What do you think?
Woohoo! We made it.
They said we had commitment issues. Who would believe that, right? And being on our second episode, we're going to look forward a little bit. In our first episode, we looked back at what had been going on in the trade world with the administrations and President Trump's trade policies and tariff announcements. We showed Mohawk Global's website how we've been following the news in order to keep everybody up to date. And today, in honor of it being our second episode, we're going to talk about April 2nd, a big day circled on every trade professional's calendar, Tariff Armageddon, or the Great Trade Wall of America. We don't know what it's going to be. A lot of commentary going around there. Kenton, April 2nd is a big day. We've had a lot of customers asking us what's going to happen. Can you give us, and while I know we don't know the details, can you give us a quick rundown of what you know about April 2nd regarding tariff and this administration's pronouncements?
Yeah, so this administration is very vocal on reciprocal tariffs. There is a element of pursuing fairness. I think what we see is the term reciprocal being used in avoidance of retaliatory. The conversation is very much, we have trade partners that, in the eyes of this administration, are unfairly burdening our exporters with tariffs, while on the U.S. side, we have historically been advocates of a free trade market and have reduced tariffs to a very, very low state. So the administration wants to level the playing field, so to speak. And that's where, again, that's where we're looking at reciprocity. Whatever they charge our commodities, the administration wants to flip the script and charge their production the same or similar tariffs.
And in episode 1, you called President Trump the tariff sheriff, and this kind of fits in with that theme, right? Of finding an injustice in this administration's eyes and seeking to correct that.
Certainly.
I think that the idea of reciprocal tariffs touches a lot of different countries, right?
Yeah.
There's been a lot of talk lately, and we both have issues with this name, big time, about the Dirty 15. First of all, obviously,
we got to change it. We got to change it.
Alliteration is important, right?
Yeah, it's got to be the Filthy 15. Let's
15.
Start that moniker now.
Or we knock 3 off and call it the Dirty Dozen. I don't care, but alliteration's important. But tell me about the Filthy 15, Kenton. Or the Dirty 15.
Yeah, so we don't have an official list. We do know, based on the State of the Union address and some other activities, that it's likely countries, trading partners such as South Korea and India are included, but we don't have a comprehensive list.
So these are 15 countries that the U.S. has identified as having the largest barriers to receiving U.S. exported goods and the most likely targets in this reciprocal tariff conversation. And you said we've heard South Korea, we've heard India, we've heard Brazil floated around. There was a I believe you had shared with me a map, and maybe we can get a link in our comments below to the article. Was it a Bloomberg article?
It was a Bloomberg. Yeah, Bloomberg took the data from the USTR and put together a map, color-coded map of the disparity between different countries.
So shout out outside of South Korea, Brazil, India. What are some others that you think are probably, again, no promises?
No promises, but looking at, I think Southeast Asia is going to see a lot of impact. South Korea, Taiwan, Vietnam, India, those are all popping up as hot areas. You know, I think it was Besant of the USTR mentioned they're looking at tariff levels, non-tariff barriers. And in that, I think they're making the point of VAT taxes, GST, those kind of things, currency manipulation, which we know in specific, I believe, to Vietnam in Trump's first term, he made a big deal of that.
Sure.
And then we have unfair funding, which falls in line, I think, with the subsidies. We see that in the countervailing suits, and then also labor suppression. So these are areas that Besant has been quoted as making a very firm assessment on. These are the areas these different countries are going to be measured in.
But, you know, in reading his comments, and again, this is U.S. Trade Representative, right? And reading his comments, the rhetoric sounds softer, at least now, than maybe what we've heard on our ongoing battle with our brothers to the north, Canada, for example. That the rhetoric, talk to me about what you've heard from the U.S. Trade Representative with regards to the goal over the next, we're running out of time, 10, 11 days.
You know, we do know that he said specifically, I'm optimistic that on April 2nd, some of the tariffs may not go into effect because a deal is pre-negotiated, or that once countries receive the notification of their reciprocal tariff number, that right away they will come to us and negotiate. So that's a direct quote from him, which basically tips his hand a little bit in saying, hey, we want to use this to negotiate something a little more positive or comprehensive that both nations are seeing benefit from. You know, to me, this does tell us that the USTR is aware that tariffs are not generally good for the overall economy. There may be some benefits to commodities and certain industries. And I think we've heard the term, is it strategic tariffs? Sectoral tariffs, that April 2nd might see that come.
Another category of tariffs, correct?
Yeah. So this one's interesting because it's not specific to reciprocal as much as looking at industries, which I would say our 232 tariffs on steel and aluminum was pretty much a precursor to that. And looking at the 232, it's possible we could see 232 on Europe as it relates to automobiles. We've seen some reports, I think it was out of Reuters, that articulated vehicles in the US shipped to the EU have a 10% tariff, whereas vehicles out of the EU coming into the US have 2.5%, not counting pickup trucks.
Sure.
But so it's possible that there would be a sectoral tariff on the automotive industry out of the EU. So that wouldn't necessarily line up in the reciprocal tariffs, but looking specifically at sectors and commodities and industries that are of importance.
And that feels more protectionist to me. And I guess it's not at the end of the day, right?
Well,
it drives negotiation, but that feels like, hey, we've got an industry in the US that's potentially harmed. We've identified this barrier to trade that your country's put up to receiving US exports, and we're going to specifically protect this US sector, the root of the word there. We're going to protect this US sector as opposed to a broad tariff on reciprocal tariffs. And to go back to reciprocal tariffs, I think they're the ones that most people are worried about. They're the ones that have been in the news a little bit more. I think it's important to point out, and we get asked this constantly, and I'm sure you hear it too. What about me, right? From our clients, right? And to your point, earlier, it's too early to tell. I think hopefully by our third or fourth pod here, we'll be able to give you a little bit more insight into what's going on. But I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of this goes down to April 2nd. We may or may not see extensions, as we've seen in other cases, like the 30-day extensions originally given to Canada and Mexico. We may see that again if the administration believes that there is a genuine negotiation going on. So at this point, if you're in one of those hot zones, I think you've got a plan for reciprocal tariffs being enacted, but you're in the tough spot of not knowing exactly what you're planning for, right? And it's an unenviable position, and it's been part of the criticism of the administration's rollout of these tariffs. Even if you're a supporter of the tariffs, the uncertainty that's facing the business community as these roll out with a degree of vagueness certainly makes it difficult to do business.
Yeah, I watched a class by a Dr. Hartley, who's a macroeconomist, and he was posting some of his lectures, and he said something that was interesting, and it was the economist or the economy needs to take President Trump seriously, if not literally. So we know that based on some of the other things that have happened, what he literally said may not necessarily be the mode or what happens, but he's serious about what he is saying. And we've seen that in the implementation and the uncertainty of how we are seeing these things roll out. I think the sectoral tariffs would be easier under what we've seen with the IEEPA, the International Executive Emergency Presidential Act. But I am struggling to find clarity in how he will handle the reciprocal tariffs. I'm not sure under what regime or under what statutes he can implement that. I've got some communications out to a few trade attorneys to help me understand that better and to articulate that, because I think understanding the statutes that he can utilize to implement that help us understand the timeline that is feasible and reasonable. While he can certainly issue an executive order that he would like this to take place on the 2nd, how feasible is it to take 17,000 tariff lines or HTS lines and pair those up with the 180 plus countries that are in the World Customs Organization, the WCO? That's over 1.3 million HTS pairs to try to establish a data set that is reciprocal tariff based. I mean, I know Elon's involved in a lot of things with the White House, but the guy who programmed PayPal might be a little bit too busy to start programming this piece of software, but somebody's going to have to, and I imagine it's going to take some time.
Well, you're absolutely correct, right? One of the knock-on effects of what we're seeing, and I think it's time on borderline genius here. I almost feel like we should give a Wayne's World. We're not worthy. We're not worthy. Here are to the men and women that are writing entries every day, working on clearances. I'll speak about the Mohawk team working extremely hard to make entry on imports. And part of that, maybe you can explain a little bit of that, is you talked about the magnitude of the data sets and the tariff numbers. The system just can't keep up, right, with what's going on. We all have electronic integration with U.S. Customs for the purposes of filing customs entries. The tariff code is integral to that. And to go from an executive order to a law to something that U.S. Customs has generated the process for a customs entry writer or a customs broker to file an entry, that's complicated, right? You want to share some light on as somebody who's done it all?
I mean, yeah, if you look at the customs tariff book, so you have, your tariff line item, your HTS code, and then to the right of it, you have the two columns for duty. You've got the standard duty rate, and then you have the least favored nation duty rate. Now, everybody's on the standard rate unless you are a country that we participate with a bilateral, or in the case of USMCA, trilateral agreement, and we've reduced that tariff rate. So we have indicators for those few countries that we have those free trade agreements with. And that's the little nugget or the checkbox that overwrites that standard tariff rate. In all of the new tariffs that were implemented under the executive order, we see a pairing of kind of a child tariff code. So you get the standard tariff code. Let's say we're talking automotive, 8708, 295160, a side panel or a body part of an automobile. Underneath that, if it's coming out of China, is a 99 number for the Section 301. And if the body part is made of aluminum, another 99 number for the aluminum tariffs. And so you've got these tiered lines, which each one will have their own tariff rate. To try to create a 99 code for each country would be burdensome. Not only burdensome on the programmers to create it, but also burdensome on the customs brokers across the US trying to apply those to each entry. So as an importer, what used to be one item, one tariff number is one item and potentially 4 or 5 tariff numbers. So the process is now slowed down from the customs brokerage standpoint. The process is slower for customs because now they're auditing 5 lines for every commodity that's coming in. And that is going to be cumbersome. It will create backlog in the approvals of customs entries.
And not only on that, Kenton, and sorry to interrupt there. I thought you were coming to a pause.
No, you're good.
But I mean, on top of that, you've got the information required. You think about the aluminum in this mouse, this disappearing mouse, right? If that's imported now under the 232 derivative rules, we've got to know where that aluminum was created, which that gets pretty deep into the supply chains, and so I will kind of end here on this topic by again saying, thank you to the Mohawk customs brokerage team for your hard work, dedication, and thank you to all the customs brokerage professionals out there. If there was ever time to buy your favorite entry rider a beer or a burger, or just give them a big thank you, it's now. It's been a lot of chaos in the industry keeping up with these changes. So,
as a former entry rider, we love tacos.
Who doesn't?
Exactly.
So tacos are a safe bet. On that note, again, to kind of recap here, April 2nd, everybody needs to hold on to their hats. We got to take this administration seriously. President Trump has told us, to your point, and I appreciate that advice you gave earlier, that you've got to listen to him, right? He's not, he's very serious. Whether
maybe not literal,
whether they're implemented exactly how they're described initially, or not, or whether people come to the negotiation table and concessions are made, we don't know. But please plan on additional tariffs on April 2nd, and consider it a happy stroke of fortune if they are not applied to your imports.
Definitely.
Anything else for episode 2 of Borderline Genius, Kenton? Anything else you want to talk about?
No, I think you know, I mentioned some of the countries who I think are in the filthy 15. So look at your supply chains. Are you heavily reliant in Southeast Asia? If so, be prepared. Probably going to see some price increases. Now, I don't want to scare anyone. You know, we've seen Chinese tariffs at 25% plus the 20% on IEPA. So basically, you're looking at 45% out of China. Now, the numbers I've seen looking at some trade data that has been published by the USTR, the average tariff rate into India is around 17% when you include their VAT tax, 9%, 9.5% into Vietnam, like 13% in VAT taxes in South Korea. So even if we have reciprocal tariffs and you've already transitioned your supply chain out of China and into some of these countries, I don't think the burden is going to be such that you're regretting the decision, but something you should calculate for and be prepared.
Great shout out there. I appreciate that little bit of data. And again, we will post the link to that Bloomberg article that talks about the different different countries and the delta between our tariffs and their tariffs, the reciprocal conversation. And then lastly, we don't have time to talk about it right now, but you did mention that the administration and U.S. trade professionals are looking at the application of value-added tax as a trade barrier. I'm curious for many of our listeners. Kenton and I both have opinions. We'll share them for another day. But if any of our listeners or viewers want to post a comment on their thoughts about VAT being considered as a trade barrier, I would love to get those comments.
Oh yeah.
I'm curious what everybody else thinks out there. So with that, let us wrap up episode 2 of Borderline Genius. Again, this is Borderline, that's Genius.
Depending on the
other
day. Way.
Depending on the day. Depending on the day, right? We're thank you for your time, for listening. Please follow us, please subscribe. Please feel free to comment. We'd love to get some dialogue going. And have a wonderful day. Kenton, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.